Ever since she was a little girl, Marley had been afraid of letting her feet dangle over the side of the bed. It was a fear that had been instilled in her by her mother, a woman who wasn't quite right. She's filled Marley's furthest back memories with stories of monsters and creatures lurking in the darkness, waiting to snatch up unsuspecting children who didn't keep their feet safely tucked under the covers. As she grew older, Marley tried to shake the fear and discard her mother's dark imaginings. She told herself it was childish, that there was nothing to be afraid of. But every time she let her feet slip over the edge of the bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. She couldn't help but jerk them back under the covers to perceived safety. But one night, she heard a strange noise coming from under the bed. It was a low growling sound, like an animal breathing heavily. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest, as the noise grew louder and more menacing. Marley told herself that she was asleep and dreaming. She decided to reality check herself. She grappled for her phone to check the time. Unfortunately, it clearly reported the accurate time. Which, in case you aren't aware, in dreams, clocks are blurry or say the wrong time. Suddenly, it stopped. She tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just her imagination. But as the nights wore on, the fear only grew stronger. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was reaching out from under the bed, waiting to grab her ankles and drag her down into the darkness. And then, one night, it happened. She was asleep in bed when her foot slipped out from under the cover and over the side. The motion snapped her awake, and she felt something brush against her foot. It was a cold, slimy touch, like the fingers of a corpse. And they tickled her toes. A horrible chill raked through her body and she felt like throwing up. She screamed and scrambled back, but it was too late. Something had grabbed her ankle and was pulling her down into the darkness under the bed. Marley was trapped, unable to move as the thing dragged her deeper into its lair. She could hear its breathing, rasping sound that made her skin crawl. The thing that held her ankle weighed Marley down and she drifted down into another world. It was a dark and twisted place, a maze of shadowy corridors and dank, musty rooms. The thing released her ankles just as she landed on the dirty ground, tickling her toes again before it let her go. She could hear the creature's footsteps behind her, getting closer and closer. She tried to run, but her feet wouldn't move. They seemed to have grown roots into the ground and the skin of her toes crawled with the feeling of the cold tickling fingers. She was trapped, alone in the darkness with the thing that had dragged her down. Finally, she saw a glimmer of light up ahead. It was a door, just barely visible in the gloom. She slammed her eyes shut and willed her feet to move. When the sensation of tickling finally subsided, she was able to pick up her feet at long last. Marley ran towards the light, throwing herself through it just as the creature caught up to her. She slammed the door shut behind her, panting and gasping for breath. She caught a glimpse of the vile thing just before the door closed it out. A sinister creature, small and wiry, with spindly limbs and long fingers that ended in sharp, hooked claws. Its skin was a sickly shade of grey, stretched tight over its emaciated frame. Its eyes were large and black, and they seemed to glow with a malevolent light. The tickler had a mouth full of jagged teeth, and it grinned with twisted pleasure, once again reaching for her. But the door closed on it just in time, fading the awful world to black. And then, just like that, she was back in her own bedroom, safe in her own bed. She reality checked herself again, breathless as she tried to focus on her phone in a violently shaking hand. Correct time. Not blurry. This wasn't a dream. The fear never left Marley. She knew that the thing under the bed was still out there, waiting for its next victim. And she knew that it was only a matter of time before it came for her again. As the years went by, Marley heard more and more stories of people who had experienced similar things. There were reports from all over the world of children who had disappeared from their beds, taken by creatures that lurked in the shadows. There were tales of adults who had been dragged into other worlds, trapped in a nightmare realm that they could never escape from. And then there were those who simply disappeared, leaving no trace behind. They would go to bed one night, tucked in safe and sound. Then their bed would be empty in the morning, as though they had vanished into thin air. But Marley knew. She warned her friends and family, but they just laughed and shrugged it off as childish nonsense. Marley knew that these stories were more than just urban legends. She knew that there was something out there, something that was preying on those who let their guard down and allowed their feet to slip over the side of the bed. And so she issued a warning to anyone who would listen. She told them to be careful, to never let their guard down, to always keep their feet safely tucked under the covers, away from the darkness outside the bed. Because you never know what might be waiting for you, she said. You never know what horrors lurk in the shadows, just waiting for the chance to drag you down into their lair. And so, as you lie in your own bed tonight, remember Marley's warning. Remember that there is something out there, something that is always watching and waiting. And never, ever let your foot slip over the side of the bed. Because once it does, there may be no coming back.
In the darkness of the night, when the world is still and quiet, beware the bed where shadows hide, and something wicked lurks inside. It waits beneath the mattress springs, for children's toes to start to swing, and when they dangle down below, it strikes with fingers like a crow. Its touch is light, its laugh is shrill. It tickles toes with gleeful thrill. And when it's done with childish play, it drags its prey to hell to stay. So keep your feet tucked in tonight, and never let them out of sight. For if you do, you might just find that the tickler is not so kind.